All right. So, welcome to the first instalment of our World Cup series. Joining me tonight or this evening is World Cup referee from Australia, Chris Bambridge. Welcome, Chris.
Good evening, Ben. Good to be here.
It's great to have this moment to share with you and tell your story. And Chris, look, we'll go through what led you up to the World Cup, and we'll talk about which World Cup and all that kind of stuff as we go. But I think our listeners will also be really keen to hear, I guess a truncated version of our, given you had such a long career, but how you started and leading up to what is for referees the ultimate experience of you being able to sit here now in 2025 and say, yes, I'm a World Cup referee. So,
can I just ask, you haven't got a big red book and a few other guests, have you? It's not This Is Your Life, is it?
It's not. No, there's Mike Munro's not about to appear.
Okay.
The budget didn't quite stretch that far, mate.
No. All right, mate.
But in all seriousness, this is something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And even during lockdown, I've spoken to you about this, that it's really important for us to recognise the history of Australian refereeing. We've got some amazing men and amazing women that have gone on and represented Australia at the ultimate. And we don't really have a great record of keeping that history alive. And I know before I got the opportunity to go off to Brazil in 2014, I had an A-League match in Melbourne with yourself, and I said it'd be fantastic for you to come and join us for a pizza and a beer after the game and hear your experiences, and that's something that I really value and really hold true to what I took into my World Cup. So
I appreciate the opportunity to do that too. That was good.
No, it was wonderful. I think it's
you bought the beer, I might remember. Yeah,
that's right. It's not true what they say about me. So, all right. Well, look, tonight's not about me, Chris. It's about hearing your story, and it's a very, very long story. Starting well back in England. And then leading up to the ultimate as well. So look, there's no better place to start really than at the beginning. So Chris, what tell us the pathway that you took. What age did you begin? Where did you start? And I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Well, I as you said, I began refereeing in England in 1968. And just a very brief history. We didn't have laws of the games exams. What we did, and if people know what this is, there's a game called Sabutio, which is 22 little men and 3 guys in black shirts. And I sat down with the guy that was going to be my first inspector on my very first game in his lounge room. And we set the board up and he said, everything's fine. You've checked everything. Now, you're going to kick off. So we kicked off and he moved these little men around and he said, the ball goes over this line. What's your decision? I said, goal kick. Why? Because it was last play by an attacker, blah, blah, blah. So we did this for 15 minutes. Then we had an orange juice. He says half time. So he turned the board around. So the teams were kicking the other way. And we merrily went through this, me making decisions. And then at the end, he said, well done, Christopher. You've got 99 out of 100. 99? Yeah. And he said, what's the last thing you're going to do, bearing in mind you're playing at Wembley, everything's fine, before you kick off? And I said, I'm probably going to say a little prayer. He said, that'll help. He said, but are you not going to count the players? I said, yeah, of course I am. And he said, well, why didn't you do that 30 minutes ago? Because you played with 11 red men and 12 blue men. And that was a fabulous lesson, Ben. And I'd recommend it to anyone because 25 years later, I'm in the middle of the Azteca Stadium and I'm still going 1, 2, 3, 4. Not as obvious as that, but I still counted the players. So that was my start. I came here in 74 with my wife and 2 kids. And by 77, fortunately, I'd been placed on the NSL. If anyone remembers the old NSL, which was the
Phillips League back then?
Yeah, I suppose it was the real start for me of football in this country.
Yeah.
And for all the years that I was on there, we flew by the seat of our pants. The players, the referees, the officials, the administrators, really, with all due respect, hadn't got a lot of idea of what we were doing. And I can recall about 8 years ago, I went to a soccer player who played for Moorlbach. I went to his funeral, and another player said to me, "What are you doing at a player's funeral?" And I said, "I'm here out of respect." And I said, "I hope at the end of the day, it would be nice if everybody said to me, the best referee you've ever had." They only did that when they won. But I said what I wanted at the end was that people respected what I was trying to do. I never got it right all the time. And that's why I think nowadays I'm so pleased for many years we've had that word emblazoned on our chest, but we have to earn it. It doesn't come with a cornflake packet. So that's where I started. And the guy who started me came to coach Kettering Town, whom I was playing for. He knew nothing about the game, but he told me to go and buy a flag and run the line for the A team. I wasn't good enough to play. Bloke by the name of Ron Atkinson, you might have heard of him. Mm-hmm. And I caught up with him many years later at the MCG. I refereed Nottingham Forest and Manchester United. I remembered him, but he didn't remember me. So
at the MCG,
that's a little bit of history. Yes. I came here in 81, I think it was. I was put onto 79. I was put onto the FIFA list. 81, I was an AR only in the National Youth Championships here in Australia. Worked with one of our great referees. Loved the guy, Tony Boscovich. He was a law unto himself and a great referee, but a totally different personality to me. But enjoyed every time I officiated with him. Did you?
I might jump in there, Chris, if that's okay. Just I guess for people listening to understand that Tony Boscovich he came out from Yugoslavia. Migrated in a similar way that you did, and went to 2 World Cups for Australia under the banners. Unfortunately, he's passed away. Went back to Yugoslavia. And passed away a couple of years ago, sadly. So that was one of the other things that kind of prompted me to say, well, you know what, we think about these opportunities to talk. We won't get that with Tony anymore.
No.
And I thought, well, you and I spoke before 2014, and it's a great opportunity to get your side of the things on the record, I guess, if you will, now.
Yeah.
And for those listening, we now think about once you reach national level. The NSL or now the A-League and FIFA, onwards and upwards, you are an assistant or a referee. And
That's
of course, back in your day, prior to, I think that only began in about 91, 92, where they started to specialise a little bit. So that gives the listeners a little bit of an idea. But I might throw back to you around the Bosco era and leading into your time.
And that was, and to be honest, Ben, that was really difficult. I mean, when I went to the World Youth Championships in Mexico in '83, I rang George Wallace here in Victoria, and I said, "Mr. Wallace, I need to run some lines." I hadn't had a flag in my hand for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And his first instinct, "Well, we can't afford to have you." Yeah, sorry, Mr. Wallace, I need to do it. Yeah. And I'm glad I did, because at the '83 World Youth Championships in Mexico, I got a line on the semi-final and a line on the final, which was Argentina and Brazil. Wow. In the Azteca and 100,000 people. I don't remember any of it. I don't remember any of it. It's just a blur, but a fabulous experience. So,
and what do you think was a blur, Chris? Was it that you were absolutely in the zone?
I was right there, totally focused. And I've actually saw it on YouTube. I can't find it now, but I found it on YouTube once. And I swear, I reckon that's where the Mexican wave started. And it started on the opposite side of the stadium. People will tell you it's different sports. It came around, and I swear to you, as it got behind me, I felt myself push forward.
Yeah, right.
I literally felt it was that wonderful feeling, but frightening, but a great experience. So I'm glad I did that, because, as I said, and you know as well as I do, and there'll be people out there now who may want to concentrate on becoming an AR, and at FIFA level, there's an opening for people, and that's what's wonderful about it. So anyway, I went from the '83 experience, and the next thing I did was in '85. I went to the very first under-16 World Cup in China, And there, when they say under 16s, these weren't little school kids. I mean, West Germany at the time, as they were known then, I think out of this squad of 22 or 24, 16 of them were playing in the Bundesliga. So these weren't kids, they were men. Right? And I had a fabulous experience there. I got the final. I refereed the final, which was West Germany and Nigeria. And I've told very few people this, so all you referees who listen, learn a lesson. I'm all lined up, 80,000 people in the Workers' Stadium. I lead the teams out. And they told me 4 days before the game. And what I did, I went to my room, rang my wife, told her I wasn't coming home, and I've got the final. And I just collapsed. I physically collapsed. So for 3 days, I didn't train. I wasn't allowed to train or anything. Kept me in cotton wool. I walked out onto the stadium, led the teams out. We all lined up for national anthems. Stood to attention, put my arms by my side and thought, oh, my God, I've forgotten my whistle.
Oh, really?
Truth. There was a guy from FIFA standing on the running track. Sent him to the dressing room, told him to look for me, orange box and get me whistle. And I said, go and get it. And he said, I haven't got time. I said, well, he said, you're going to have to shout loud. You've never seen, Ben, such a long toss-up of the coin in your life. And he gave me my coin. But, and I had the only red card of the tournament. But again, a learning experience. I'd got all my emotion out of me before the game. And I'm saying to all the referees out there, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you haven't got the tummy turning before you step over that white line, don't do the game. And I learned a valuable lesson from that. And I never, ever went out with that laid-back attitude again. So that was another learning experience. Not a good one, but a learning experience for the future.
That's it. There's no such thing as failure, is there? It's all learning for the next.
Oh,
the next
yeah. And then, of course, we can come back to this if you want to, but 86 was the World Cup. And after that, I had another wonderful experience. And if anyone gets the opportunity to do this, or if we ever get it back in this country, volunteer for the Olympic Games. It's the most magnificent experience. And it's not all about soccer. It was for me, obviously. But we had Keith Hackett was there from England. And Keith was a lovely man, great referee, but rather brazen. Like I said to him, after a couple of days, how's the wife? Have you rung her? Oh, yeah, I better give her a call. That was his sort of attitude. But they had this song, and everywhere we went, walking down the street or whatever we were doing, this song was played like it is at all the Olympics. Couldn't understand a word they were saying. And we all kept saying, won't it be great when they played in the closing ceremony? And they didn't. But as the flame went out, I'm getting goosebumps now, 80,000 people hummed it. And I've never seen so many grown men cry in my life. And again, another fabulous experience. So,
so you're talking obviously about the Seoul Olympics in '88.
Yes.
Look, I might, if we can, just kind of for the listeners too, Chris. You know, they're probably the two pinnacles, if of your career. You know, it's pretty hard to get to higher than the Olympic Games and the FIFA World Cup. They're the two biggest sporting events in the world.
Sure.
So really getting back to that kind of, you've started, you've done your course back in England, you've moved out to a new country, you've landed in Melbourne. Kind of, how did you progress? You mentioned that kind of you got to the NSL. What was it between when you first got here and the NSL? What kind of things did you go through in that time? What steps did you take?
When I first came here, and this is going to sound terrible, my first couple of games were in the Victorian State League 3.
Okay.
And the secretary came to me, dear Wally Bates, and he said to me, Chris, you're probably upset. You've come here as a grade 1 referee and we're putting you in State League 3. We've had too many people from overseas that have come here with all these credentials. We've given them some of the top games and they've failed miserably. So we wanted to get used to it. Now, my very first game, and please understand this, I'd only ever refereed sort of English players. And I'm confronted with a team called Carlton. And I looked at the team sheet and the names went across the front of the page and round the back. And they're mainly Greeks. And the game's merrily going on. And all of a sudden, this guy spoke in Greek, but obviously venomously towards me, and I blew the whistle. And I called him to me. I called him to him. I said to him, "Those words come out of your mouth again, you're gone." And the secretary came in afterwards and said, "How long have you been here?" I said, 6 weeks. And he said, you speak Greek? I said, "No, I don't need to speak Greek." I knew from the venom in his eyes and the language and the voice, it wasn't complimentary. Oh, he said, "I will warn them for the next time." So it's all these little things, Ben, that assist you. And I went from there. I think I had a couple of games in State League 2 and then into what was then State League 1. And I ended up, I think at the end of the first season, getting the Doherty Cup final, which was the reserve grade final. And if I look back, I think my first instinct was, hang on, I'm doing a reserve game here. But when people told me how important the actual game was to those reserve teams, that's when the message sunk in. And I've always had that opinion. Every single game I've done, whether it's a reserve game or whether it's a World Cup game, it's important to 23 people. In fact, 43 people now, because I've got more people sitting on a touchline.
Yeah,
but I've always had that attitude.
And it's that complacency that you were mentioning before that, like you said, that those two teams in front of you, that's their World Cup for the day.
That's right.
And exactly. It deserves our attention. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, when I came back, my first game back was Geelong Rangers and another team in Geelong. And one of our referees down there said, "Oh, there's a reporter who wants to talk to you, interview you about the World." And I said, "Yeah, happy to talk to him, stay behind and talk to him after the game." Went out and did the game. And this young man was really good. And he said, I said, "If you ask me a question and I say no comment, you accept that." But what he said to me was, "How can you go 3 weeks ago from 80,000 people in the World Cup? You've probably got 80 here and 60 of them are here only because you've come down. How can you do that?" And I quoted what I've just said to you. The game is important to the 23 of us. And if I make a mistake or cock it up today, Mr. Wallace at the Federation's going to know before I get back to Melbourne. So it's in my own interest that I perform to the best level that I possibly can. And that's a lesson I've learned all through. So I went from there. And then, as I said, in 77, I went on to the National Soccer League. I ended up doing four grand finals in that. I got and look, all these things are nice. And yes, I got the Referee of the Year, which you've won, and things like that. They're all bits of kudos that you can put in there and in the memory bank. And it's nice to think about those sometimes, but that's not what it's all about. The important thing at the end of the day is that we do the best we can every single time we go out on the park. And that's basically it.
Such a great mentality, Chris, that the game is bigger than us, and it was around before us, and it'll be around after us, and
it certainly will.
We have that very important role to do what's best for it. So, so when you're talking State League 1, that would be the equivalent of NPL these days.
The NPL now, yeah.
And then when the 1977 is when the NSL started, because prior to that it was still state-based competition.
Yes, yeah.
77, great year that one. And so, then obviously that would have been a great opportunity for you going into, and I remember when the A-League started, going from the NSL to the A-League, it's a new horizon. So
yes.
How was that for you, going from what you knew in terms of state football to this brand new national competition?
Well, in all honesty, Ben, suddenly it didn't mean getting in the car and going 15 Ks down the road to referee a game.
Yeah.
It was going to an airport. And in those days, you flew up on the day of the game and you flew back at night. There were no overnight stays and all of this.
Yeah.
So it was physically, it was difficult from a traveling aspect. And I can remember going to Brisbane one day, leaving here, and it was about 16 degrees. Gordon Nicholson picked me up in Brisbane and it was 32. And it was like running around under a blanket with the humidity. And I was very tired. I nearly said something, very tired at the end of the game. But coming back, I got to the airport about 11 o'clock at night. Coming home, seriously, I wound down every window in the car to stay awake. And that's how difficult that side of it was. But again, you had to overcome those things. And I suddenly, as I said, went from literally driving the car 20 Ks to flying into stay to meeting. And that was a great part, the camaraderie between the referees in all of the states. And you mentioned someone when we were talking before, Chris Conti in Canberra, Gordon Nicholson in Brisbane, and all these people. I'm still in touch with those people. I still have that, not every day, not every month even, but perhaps once a year I see Chris, or I exchange emails with Gordon and other people. And that network, or that group of, and I call them friends, has remained throughout my whole refereeing career. So that's very important. I think that's the way that we grew up. And as I said, in those days, we were flying by the seat of our pants. And I remember the first time I went to Marconi, all I used to do, I used to take a $20 note with me. I didn't carry a wallet and passes and all that. And I got in this taxi at the airport and I said, oh, Marconi Stadium, or whatever it was called. And I'm watching the meter.
Yes. That's a fair way from the airport, isn't it?
Suddenly it got up to about 40. And I said to this guy, listen, when we get there, can you stop and wait, please? I've only got $20. Anyway, I went in. I think it was Tony Labrosetta was there.
Yes.
And I actually went to him, cap in hand, and said, could I have my fee before the game? I need to pay the taxi.
Yeah, right.
So again, what I'm saying, Ben, it's all lessons in life, and you learn these things, and you have to learn from them, and that's so vital. You can't just do it, 3 weeks again. I go up to Marconi and ask for money. That's disgraceful. So it's all a great learning experience. And what I also did, and I think this is important to mention, I combined my work life, and I worked for a collection agency in the finance industry, but I put my work life into my refereeing. I learned to deal with different individuals on a soccer field, and I learned to deal with different individuals in an office environment. I mean, we had 2 young ladies. If I went to one and said, I need that done now, I don't know what the answer is. I used to go to her and say, could you please do this for me? The other one I could say that to, and if I didn't, I wouldn't get it done. So it came down to adjusting yourself and refereeing, and in a work life, just doing what you had to do to get through it.
That's it. There's things that you drag from your work life that help you refereeing, and refereeing is something that, and the stories you've been telling so far, Chris, show that football is the greatest teacher, and that football and travel and meeting different people feeds back into the person that we are as well. So it's one of life's great lessons, actually. So look, mate, that's fantastic, and again, congratulations on your NSL career, 4 grand finals and all the referees of the year. It's something that nobody can take away from you, and that will be etched in history forever. And that's why, again, one of the reasons why we want to make sure that we keep our history really strong, that we remember those that have gone before us, so that we can build on those foundations to take our game to the next level. So you spoke about those times in the NSL, and then when you got once you attained your FIFA badge, what were those steps? I'm guessing back prior to then, Australia was part of Oceania, one of the 6 confederations. You would have been familiar with, I guess, the UEFA side of things, even though you weren't FIFA back in England. But what was it like once you tell us the moment you were awarded your FIFA badge?
Well, in those days, Ben, you had to do 2 full A internationals to earn your badge. We had a young man here just before me, David Yelland, very good referee, NSL referee and everything. He was on the FIFA list for 2 years and never got 1 full international, so he didn't get his badge. It didn't come in the mail like it does now, so we had to do that. And I was appointed to an Oceania tournament in Noumea, where there were only 2 full internationals, and I got them both. So I earned my badge. When I came back to Australia later that year, I had Australia and Mexico. After Bosco had them in Sydney and allowed them to kick the tripe out of each other, I got the backlash. Anyway, before the game, it was wonderful. Olympic Park and all, big crowd. And I was presented with my badge on the field of play, which was lovely and a great memory. So it wasn't just sort of handed down and you open an envelope and there it is. So that was the start of that. And from
how did that make you feel, Chris, at that time?
Totally proud and totally appreciative too. And I know that things have happened since then, but my wife, right out through my career was totally supportive. And my two daughters, although they didn't know it at the time, they were quite young. But my wife was. And again, that's another, I was going to say this at the end, but that's something that people need to understand. You need the love and support of people around you.
That's right.
To be able to do this. And you need to be able to, I was very selfish, like we all are.
Yep.
You know, we went away, and you've done the same, Ben. You go away, you leave your family, you leave your wife. You trust each other, and hopefully it all works out. So it's important we have that. That's one of the things that I've learned. You need that support from a lot of people, and I got that, and I'm very grateful for that. So
yeah. No, that's amazing. And so you went across to Noumea, and ironically, my first match, my first tournament for myself as well was it was in Noumea as well with John Sweeter on the lines. So that's a nice little link I didn't know before speaking to you now.
The other thing with Oceania, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, some of the games that we did, you know, we had 14-0s and 7-0s and all this. And again, I reiterate, don't overthink it and don't be overconfident. And I remember we went to dear old Gary Power, the late Gary Power, and I and Bill Monteverde went to Western Samoa for Samoa versus New Zealand, the World Cup qualifier.
Okay.
20 minutes before the game, we had no soccer balls to play with.
Yeah, right.
Someone had mislaid them. So we played with this ancient New Zealand soccer ball. When it had all finished, they had not got enough money to buy return airfare tickets. And I think, from memory, Gary lost his job because he couldn't get back to work. And those are the things that were happening there. Nothing has improved our game, in my opinion, than going into Asia. The competition is higher. The refereeing standards need to be higher. So, no, that's been a great move. But I did that all through Oceania, got some good games in those tournaments. And when I went to Singapore in '85 for the final Asian tournament of the Olympic Games, I was the only non-Asian.
Yeah, right.
Right, I was from OFC, and we had some great Asian referees over there at that time. And again, it was all a learning experience. I'd never met these guys. And I sort of walked into this room. There's a guy called Nazari from Iran. And he said to me, how many internationals you do? And I said, I think I've done 16. I have done 102. And oh my God, what am I up against here?
Yeah.
But it didn't make any difference. So again, it was all learning. And that was the great part of it.
And see, look, that's almost your introduction to Asian football while still part of Oceania. And,
yes.
And again, you know, even though our careers were well apart, my first start was in Oceania when I got my first badge, and then we moved the very next year into Asia. And you're right, it's a massive eye-opener in terms of what's out there and different cultures and different football and understanding, again, how to deal with all those different people as well. Rather than what we've just known so far.
Sure.
So, what did that do for you? So I was going to say, what did that do for you then, meeting those new people? And you go, well, I've done 16. This guy's done 100.
I think more than anything, it expanded my experiences of working with different people. I worked with people whose English was minimal, to say the least. And that was an experience. I learned very strange sign language, but we did an awful lot. You know, we're trying to describe things to each other. You know, free kick. Where do you stand for a free kick? And I met a guy from Cambodia who was brilliant at it. I think he said 3 words of English. Hello, I'm whatever. I can't remember his name.
Yes.
But when he tried to describe an incident in a game, it was perfect. He didn't need voice. He just used his hands and demonstrate. So again, it was all part of the process, all part of growing up and learning about, as you said, different cultures, different nationalities. And again, when we were in Singapore, I didn't understand this, but we changed hotels twice in 3 days.
Yeah, right.
Because referees were getting phone calls. And we went back after a game one night, and this guy, I was 4th official this night, and Nazari, we walked into the hotel, and he said to this beautiful receptionist, Monkey 27, and she said, "You're sleeping in the street tonight, Mr. Nazari." He said, "Pardon?" She said, "You cost me $100 tonight." And he said, "Why?" She said, "I said you would give 4 corners. You gave 6. They don't only bet on the result, Ben, and you probably know this.
Yeah.
That's the old saying, 2 flies climbing up a wall. So, and again, that was something I'd never, repacking my suitcase after 24 hours, never to move. But, so it's all part of the process.
Gives you that greater awareness of what's going on.
Yes.
And again, what's within our control as a referee, as well as what we just be aware of. And
yes.
Yeah. Mate, that's some really great insights there. Look, obviously that's great, and then you've started your international career and you're learning all these new things, and eventually you get the call up for the World Cup.
Yep.
Tell us about that process, Chris. How did that happen? Was it phone call? Was it a letter? Was it?
It was a letter from FIFA.
Yep.
And I had, from memory, 8 weeks to prepare for it.
Yeah, right.
That was it. There's none of this going away 4 years in advance and all the wonderful things you're doing nowadays.
Yep.
I had 8 weeks to prepare. So the first thing I did, I shouldn't say this, I stopped smoking. Because I know I was going to altitude. Anyway, I had 8 weeks to prepare. And as I said, I rang George Wallace and asked for some lines. Did all that. I had to send off measurements for suits and uniforms and all that sort of thing, as you probably still do now. Had to go and get an ECG and all that. Didn't have to do a fitness test before I went.
Okay.
No, they gave us that when we got there, and that was hard. At altitude, that was very difficult.
Now, we haven't actually stated, Chris, yet. For those, hopefully people know your name and a bit of your story, but of course we're talking about the 1986 World Cup in Mexico, and that's where you're talking about the altitude. So you've received this letter. You've got 8 weeks to prepare. What goes through your mind when you open that letter, and you might have seen it had the FIFA stamp on it. You've opened that and it said congratulations. I'm guessing that you've been selected for the FIFA World Cup. What was that moment like?
2 things come to mind: fear, and joy. And I just wanted to tell everybody that's. And I know that sounds very precocious, but that's all I wanted to do. I rang my mum in England, and told her to tell me aunties and uncles. And I just wanted to explode. It was a wonderful feeling, but there was that trepidation. And what I did for that 6 weeks. I looked after myself. I didn't do anything silly at training. I didn't do anything silly when I was refereeing. I still did my job, but I was cautious, like, a wet ground. Just be careful of the puddles. And that was always in the back of your mind. Please don't get injured. So that was the first thing that I thought. And I didn't.
Interesting you say that, Chris, because sometimes people's mentality goes the other way, going, geez, I've been selected for the World Cup. I've got to train the house down, and then suddenly we get injuries and all that type of stuff. So that kind of not fearful, but that cautious approach of I'll still do what I need to do, but I'm going to be smart about how I do it.
That's right.
Looking after yourself.
That's right. I didn't go skydiving or mountain climbing.
Had to give that up with the smoking.
I did,
yeah. Oh, mate, that's fantastic. And so then that 6 or 8 weeks of preparation, looking after yourself, still training, still being involved in matches and keeping your skills up. But comes to the time where you're at Melbourne Airport and you're waving goodbye to your loved ones as you jet off into that experience of a lifetime. Tell us about that, Chris.
Well, when I arrived there, just quickly, I got a cold on the plane, I think, and I was really snuffly. Anyway, we were there for 3 days, and then we all had to go and do this. We had to go to the hospital to do this fitness test and all of that. And being Australia, I was normally in the first 4, sort of Australia, Argentina, Bahrain, or whatever. So 4 of us go to the hospital. By 8:30 in the morning, I had blood pumped out of my arm and an ECG, and I'm on a treadmill. And I'm on this treadmill, and it's gradually. And I think I lasted 11 minutes, which wasn't good. Anyway, but what they did, they wired you all up and they ran you to saturation. I kept saying to them, I feel faint. I feel faint. Next thing I knew, I'm lying on a bed.
Mm.
They ran you to saturation.
Yeah.
And I'm all wired up. And I said to this doctor, oh, how long did I go for? I didn't go very long, did I? He said, that's not important. Your heart was back, your heart rate was back to normal within 4 minutes. That's the important part. But we went and did all that. Do you know, it's the first time in my life, Ben, I've ever had a colour test for my eyes.
Yeah, right.
We found 4 referees who were colourblind at that World Cup.
Yeah, right. They were the ones running the red lights all the time.
Well, no. And they put their cards in different pockets, and one
yes,
actually
that's
put
right.
an R on the red. All those, and again, it's all part of the process and part of learning. But we went through all of that, and we all passed the fitness test. And they said to us, when you finish the test, you go over to the far corner where there was an ambulance, and you take on oxygen, which I did. I did as I was told. One guy didn't. The boy from Sweden did. I'm fine. Next day, he collapsed in a heap.
Yeah,
and they went to him and they said, we told you what to do. You haven't done it. You know, so again, listening, learning from anybody and everybody. And, you know, so it came to the presentation, and you know, at the World Cup, they give you all the same thing, the suits and all that. And you get an envelope, which you probably remember, with your first set of appointments in. You don't open it in the room. Wait till you get back to your hotel. And I'm going to Guadalajara, and my first game is. Oh, I'll tell you what happened. They actually said to us at the opening, Harry Cavan, vice president of FIFA, was running the meeting because Haviland, the then president, hadn't arrived. And he said, this is a wonderful opportunity for all of the teams and all the players, blah, blah, blah. And it would be wonderful for our president if Brazil were to win the World Cup again. I thought, well, what does that mean? I get to my room, and I've got my opening game is Brazil versus Spain. And my assessor,
appointment, my goodness.
My assessor is Dr. Almeida from Brazil.
No pressure.
No, and then everybody knows about the ball hitting the crossbar. And
so look, tell us
I'm
about that.
I'm waiting for the check.
Yeah. So look, there'll be many listeners that won't have, you know, been familiar with that stuff, and probably many that won't have been born then. I was only a young fella myself, but yeah, you arrive at the World Cup, you do all that pre-stuff, you come together with your meetings, and there's probably talks from what like you said, the president, the vice president, the head of the referees, trying to prepare the referees best. The opening matches, you know, appointed, and the tournament starts. If you're lucky enough to be in the opening match, fantastic. But you've got that moment. So the appointments weren't announced in front of everybody. You got back to your room, and there was an envelope. Okay.
Can I just go back one small step very quickly?
Absolutely.
The interesting thing was, one of the presentations, they were talking about who can temporarily halt or cease a game, and they told us it is the match commissioner. Right? And we're all sitting there, and 4 people put their hands up, right? And the lecturers, question, this is not correct, blah, 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 blah. The only person, yeah, we understand that for this tournament. And he allowed 4 questions. Same question, same answer. When the first 4 games came out, those 4 referees were all 4th officials.
Yeah, right.
And again, Ben, a valuable experience. Keep your mouth shut and do as you're told. You know that as well as I do. At that level, you don't argue with FIFA. No way in the world. So, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all. And look, I think every referee dreams of going to a World Cup, and then to get something in an envelope that says Spain v Brazil. What went through your head there? Obviously, 2 massive powerhouses of world football.
Well, can I honestly say, I didn't expect that. I expected, forgive me, lesser teams, let's put it that way, or not so highly ranked teams. It was a game that a lot of people wanted, a lot of referees wanted, and a lot of people didn't want. There is animosity between the Brazilians who speak Portuguese and the Spanish who speak Spanish. So there was that animosity. And I had on the line for me David Suchet from America, and he'd refereed Brazil a number of times, and Jan Kaiser from Holland had refereed Spain a number of times. So we hadn't sat and had a quiet coffee before we flew out. And they went through the teams with me, educating me. Right.
Yeah.
Please don't let anybody get near the Brazilian goalkeeper. Blow the bloody whistle as they're running into the penalty area. Don't let them collide. You'll find the captain of Spain speaks perfect English, but he won't. Right. And all this, and he'll challenge you. So I learned all those little idiosyncrasies before the game. I was telling this to someone once, and they said, no, that's cheating. I said, no, it's not. It's awareness. And it's being aware of who's on your park. And they were vital lessons, vital lessons.
So even though there wasn't the trio concept that there is today in particularly in men's football, the women's, that they try to, but sometimes it's a little bit different. From what you're saying there, it sounded like there was a sense of team. You were the man in the middle. Your assistants were happy to give you that knowledge because it was in everyone's best interests to go well.
Of course it is, Ben. And again, that's a vital part of it all. Yes, you're in a competitive environment. Yes, you want the best game and that. You don't want them to have it and all of that in your own mind.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you're all in this together.
Yep.
It's as simple as 3 teams out there, and we needed to be the best one. Simple.
Fantastic. So, for those listening, how did the game go?
I thought it went all right. It was a good game. We did have an incident where there was a corner kick. The ball was played out of the area. Everybody moved out, including my assistant, right in line with the offside, virtually on the edge of the penalty area. I think it was Butragueño from Spain, hit this ball at 900 miles an hour, crashed into the crossbar, bounced down, came out. I said no goal. We all after a while, we all carried on. And then Brazil went down the other end later in the half and scored a winner. So it didn't reflect well. However, when I got into the dressing room, the very first person who walked in was the referee from 1966 and the England game, where the ball hit the crossbar. And it was 20 years and 1 day.
Wow.
And he said to me, Mr. Bambridge, I've lived with this for 20 years. Now it's your turn.
Wow, how about
and
that?
I came back and people said, oh, you're now famous. I think I was infamous. I'm not sure, Ben. But I had no problem. As you alluded to before, I got more games. I had no issues over there. Unfortunately, my wife and kids here went through some dramas. I had the police in my driveway for the next 4 weeks that I was away. But that's another story. And I didn't know about that until 15 years later.
That's right.
Kept it to herself.
Right. They protect.
So, and that happened, and that would always happen. And like as I said, I went down to Geelong, and the guy said to me there, "What would you do if the ball had hit the crossbar today?" I said, "I made the same decision. I couldn't have made any other."
Yep.
Could you please send the VAR to have a look now?
Yes, that's right.
Came in too late for me.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't around for me either. So.
And I have, and look, the first season I was back in the NSL. I came close to giving it all away.
Yeah, right.
Because everywhere I went, what are you going to do if the ball is the ball? You're a cheat and all this. Spectators, not the players.
Yeah.
And I remember going home one night and I was quite despondent. And my wife said to me, what's the matter? So I told her, and all she said was, you're not going to let them beat you, are you?
Yeah.
And I'll be forever grateful for that.
Yeah. And
I carried on and, until 1991. So, yeah. It was, again, all part of growing up and growing old.
Yeah. So then, look, Spain, Brazil, my God, there's referees would love that on their resume. And,
sure.
No doubt that's probably some of that fear and trepidation as well as that joy to say, well, you know what, I've been entrusted with this game and I'm going to go out and do the best I can. And sometimes the football gods shine on us and other times they don't. But we go out and we do the best we can and we do that honest job like you did.
Sure.
So fast forward, that wasn't the only match that you're involved in. And like I said before, you were running lines and refereeing at your World Cup. So if I remember correctly, the next match was as assistant. So you had 3 more matches as an assistant. Hungary, Canada. What do you remember of Hungary, Canada?
That was a good game. That was from memory, that was a really fast and open game. I came off physically tired at the end of that one, because I used to say to people, as you for want of a better description, as you go up the ladder, the games get less stressful physically, more mentally. The players know what they're doing, so you run accordingly. But that was a really fast game, a good game. Yeah, I enjoyed that. Yeah.
Who did you work with there, Chris?
I think that was the referee from France.
Yeah, okay.
I think it was the French referee. Yeah.
And again, that's the other great thing about a World Cup is you've got referees from all these different cultures as well as the teams, but you're learning different ways. You know, even at a World Cup, people think, oh, you know, how can you be still learning in a World Cup? Well, we never stop, right?
You've stolen my thunder at the end.
That's right. That's right. So that's a great memory as an AR too. Then the next one, you've had a couple of European heavyweights as well. You've already had Spain, but this one was Denmark, Germany. AR1 on the near touch line. So what do you remember about that one?
Good game too. I tell you, and the guy, I was trying to think while I was talking to you. The guy played for Denmark who came here and played in Victoria. And I got his shirt after the World Cup. I didn't go hunting it. They just sort of came in the dressing room and gave him out. I'm trying to think of his name. But he came here to Australia. And that was a good open game. That was, good football. I don't think we had any yellow cards in that. That was George Courtney, the English referee.
Yes. Very famous. He was right.
Comes from Yorkshire. Couldn't understand a word he said. He was worse than the Chinese referee.
Right.
But again, a fabulous experience.
Fantastic. And then to get 4 matches of FIFA World Cup, my God, you must be very proud. And look, I must say I'm very proud of you too. And then, to have Germany, Mexico in Mexico. So was this the Azteca?
No, Guadalajara.
Oh, my apologies.
And we were told,
tell us about doing the home nation in their World Cup versus Germany, if you don't mind.
It was fanatical. I heard stories of husbands not taking food home for their families so they could buy tickets and all sorts of things. But FIFA told us before the game, if West Germany win, you go back to the dressing room. We'll bring you food and some drinks and stay there until we fetch you. If Mexico win, we go straight back to the airport and back to Mexico City. Mexico lost. So we were staying in Guadalajara, and we were there for probably a couple of hours after the game. And when we went back to the hotel was covered in green and blue banners. The police were there, and there'd been some incidents of all sorts of things. And I got into bed that night, Ben, and I thought to myself, I don't want to depress anyone. I just thought to myself, am I really putting these people's lives in danger? Are they that fanatical about it all? And I not suddenly, but it brought home to me, as a referee, you have a great responsibility, no matter whether it's Brighton reserves or Spain versus Brazil. Your responsibility doesn't alter, it just exacerbates, that's all. And there were some terrible things happened, but that's part of the game. That's part of life, I suppose. So,
how did you move on from that moment? Obviously, it's your 4th match in a World Cup. You've got the home team at home, even though it's at Guadalajara rather than Mexico City, and they lose, and you're having those thoughts. You're in your hotel room after the game. How do you move past that, Chris?
What I did, I talked to other referees. I just talked to other referees who weren't in Guadalajara, had been in Mexico City. Jan Kaiser, the Netherlands referee, was brilliant with me. He was older than me. He was brilliant. Courtney was good too.
And when you say they're brilliant, what went on?
Well, just the way that they spoke to me, and they said to me, look, they're refereeing in that environment, every week in Europe. We don't have that sort of pressure here. And they said, like, Courtney said to me, he'd refereed in Greece where people had done some terrible things after the game when Greece lost and all this. You heard it, like the Colombian guy who scored an own goal, went home and then he's murdered and all these things. But Kaiser said to me, Jan Kaiser, he said, look, yes, you have a great responsibility. I'll ask you one question. Do you enjoy what you're doing? I said, yes, I do. He said, well, keep doing it. When you stop enjoying it,
that's the moment.
Even though these things have happened, then give it away. But whilst you're enjoying it, yes, buckle up and get out there. And I did, and I refereed for another 6 years. So, it must have worked. But as I said, I went to my colleagues and listened to them, asked the question, probably got a bit emotional about it all, and they seriously, they calmed me down. And I can remember George Courtney hugging me and saying something in my ear, and I stood him back and I said, what did you say? So, no, but that's what you've just done. I did. And I laughed, and that got it all out of me.
And
so that was great.
And look, what you've spoken about there, Chris, is so fantastic in terms of, you've shown your vulnerability. I could see the emotion. It tells me, even well after this World Cup, that's something that still holds very true and important to you.
Oh yeah.
And I'm all the referees that will be watching this too. We love the game, we love our game. We love being involved. But there are those highs and lows, and we don't have to deal with it ourselves, is what I'm taking from you, that
Correct.
We can lean on each other.
Correct. Right? Yep. You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
And that's fantastic. And it probably goes back to the point you mentioned before, where some of these friendships that we make through these moments of highs and lows are the ones that stay with us forever.
They're right. They do. They do. And the memories are all there. It doesn't matter what happens to your badges or flags or medals and all that. And I lost a lot of mine in a fire, but it's all here. It's all there. Right. And I quite often, I see these people on a video or something, I think, oh yeah, I know him. From the old days. Well, it's, it'll go down in history, and and like I said before, that no one will ever be able to take that away from you, mate. No,
it's fantastic. Now, obviously along the way, people give us advice. What was the best piece of advice you ever received, and who was the one that kind of imparted that upon you, if you will?
I think there's a number of things that happened to me through my refereeing career. First of all, I think it's important, no matter what level you're refereeing, that you continue to look after your body and your mind. And if you have a problem, seek help. Go and get some help. Not just referees, other family members, just friends who have nothing to do with the game. And I've got a couple of really good friends who have nothing to do with soccer, who've helped me an awful lot. A couple of times I've really got sort of down about my own performances and things like that. Secondly, never referee injured. Don't ever referee when you're injured, to any of you that are watching or listening, because that will only do damage. And it may also affect your performance. I mean, I go now out to coaching or assessing referees. I had one a couple of weeks ago who said to me, I haven't been very well this week. I said, what the hell are you doing here? Am I supposed to take that into consideration when giving you a mark today? Oh, no. So please don't go out there refereeing. I know this sounds very simple. Always go out with clean equipment. I see a lot of referees with dirty boots. Some of you may be laughing at that. We had a referee many years ago here, cost himself a place at the national championships because him and another referee were on equal points. Down to the third decimal point, he had a report where his boots weren't clean one day. Now, I know that sounds very simple. It's important. I think also, we've said this many times in this conversation, never stop learning. Never, ever stop. And I'm not talking about changes to the laws of the game. I'm talking about experiences within games. I'm still learning now. I learn every other week when I go out and I see things happening on a field. And suddenly I think, oh, what's the decision there? No, but you should never stop learning. And I think if I was to impart one thing to referees, that would be you only get one chance to make a first impression. And I introduced that into the federation here, and I used to put that on the bottom of all my correspondence that went out. And it's very, very true. You walk into a ground, it doesn't matter whether people say we like you or we don't. What I used to like to hear was, we'll be all right today.
Yeah.
That didn't mean anything. What did it mean? I'm going to give them 3 goals and a penalty? Or no, it just meant they were comfortable seeing me there. Not necessarily pleased, but they were comfortable. So
there's that element of trust there, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is. Yeah. So those are the things that, and look, a lot of people helped me along the way. Mike Gort, one of our assistants on the old NSL, and a very good friend who passed away a couple of years ago, I could always go to him, always ring him up. Michael, I've had a shocker, or I think I have, and then we talk it through. Stuart Mellings was a great mentor to me, because he was a FIFA referee before me, and dear old Roger Lamb in his day too. So a lot of those people from that era who had the knowledge. And I think nowadays, Ben, what I'm finding is this season at the moment here in Melbourne, I'm coaching younger referees probably looking for opportunity. I mean, in all honesty, what is the point of me going to watch Lockie Keevers?
Yep.
An A-League referee on NPL games. He's going to learn nothing, and I'm not going to teach him anything. So I'm working with 18, 19, 21-year-old males and females this season, which I thoroughly enjoy because they're like sponges.
Yes.
They just absorb it. And I say to them, don't just listen to me. If you want to put it into practice and it works, terrific. If it doesn't work, stop doing it. Full stop. So I think that's important. And I think the FFV in their own way are now trying to get the right people in the right places to move these young people forward, which is what we need to do. So
that's right. And look, I guess just before we finish up, Chris, and just getting back to the World Cup, you've talked about some of those highs and those lows and those amazing moments. What are the takeaway memories that you have from 1986 FIFA World Cup, Mexico?
There are a couple. First of all, the actual proudness, I suppose, is the right word, of being one of 28 referees in the world to be there when there are so many. And I don't mean that to brag. I'm just saying
no, not at all.
It's part of the process, and just to be there, the actual excitement of being there, the build up of it all, the atmosphere in Mexico and in those stadiums was unbelievable. And I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. I'd never refereed in front of 80, 90,000 people. And that was an experience with trepidation. But once you stepped over that white line, everything changed. I knew that I was in control, and I was in control of the situation, which is different to be an assistant referee. But as the referee, you're the one. And you're the one with the responsibility. I learned also that the people of Mexico are a very resilient race. We drove through, between 83 and 86, they'd had massive earthquakes. And going to training one day, we drove through part of the city where they hadn't raised the buildings to the ground. There were still beds with sheets on them blowing out the window, these high-story things. And it was amazing, Ben. There's 28 blokes in a bus. It's all going on. As soon as we hit this region, it's deathly silence. Nobody spoke all the time until we got out the other side of it. And again, that makes me shiver. But again, it's not particularly a happy memory, but one that I'll cherish. You can see all of that on the television and in the newsreels, but when you actually see it, and I'm glad I did from that perspective, but not for the Mexican people. But they were lovely. They were friendly. They looked after us. We went to a restaurant one night, and as entertainment, we had Andalusian horses dancing in this massive restaurant. And when they reared up in front of the table, I thought, "Ooh, I'll have some vegetables with that." But they laughed, they enjoyed it. And that's the other thing from a refereeing perspective, Ben, I forgot to mention, have a sense of humour. Just have a sense of humour.
We have to have that ability, don't we?
Oh, look, you know, you and I know we don't get together very often, very rarely, in fact. But when we do, when we were talking yesterday, preparing this, we laughed.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about. So, yeah, just
absolutely.
enjoy what you're doing. And as I said, from Mexico, those are a couple of the things that I really learned. The camaraderie was brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, look, Chris, it's been amazing chatting with you.
We've gone well over time. You'll have to edit me out.
No, not at all. We could go on for days. I have no doubt. But, look, some of the lessons that you've learned, the experiences that you've had, and shared with us today. I mean, it's giving you goosebumps, mate. It's giving me goosebumps just hearing that. I just wanted to say that we're absolutely incredibly proud of you, and that will go down in history. And we thank you for your service to the game in your active career, you know, as a World Cup referee, and even to this very day, you're still there giving back to the next generation. So, Chris Bambridge, it's been my absolute pleasure, and I want to thank you very much for your time here on Next Level Refs.
Thank you, Ben, and congratulations on your great career too, my friend.
Thanks again, mate. We'll hopefully have a beer soon and have a few more conversations.
We'll see. No worries. Take care. Good luck to all your referees. Bye for now.
Cheers.